Hello there, little masters, and welcome once again to the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight you might need to use the good stuff to put out the sudden flame.
West to Hall, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, and tonight I'm joined by a man who's turned his back on the darkness, but he's brought his rude harp with him, the Beor to my Malach, Alan Sisto.
Who are you calling rude, Blondie?
Thanks, Sean. Well, tonight I'm afraid the chapter title is going to give away a bit of what happens. It's Chapter 18 of the Silmarillion, of the Ruin of Beleriand and the Fall of Fingolfin.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I mean, it's pretty much what it says on the tin for this chapter, as the expression goes. We'll see Beleriand ruined, we'll see Fingolfin fall.
Gee, you think?
But stick with us despite the spoiler, because I think this is going to be a really thrilling journey. Definitely one of my favorite battle descriptions in the whole Legendarium.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite in the Silmarillion. I still... There's one in Return of the King I like a bit better, but I do love this one. This is very personal, very heroic, very visceral. Can't wait to get to it.
Yep.
There are some surprises in this chapter tonight, too, and a lot of topics to talk about. So stick with us. If we don't like let me try that again. If you don't like what we're talking about, give us 5 minutes, because we'll be talking about
we'll be moving on to
things.
a new topic soon.
Yeah, this one's a mover. But
Yep.
before we get into the chapter, Sean, does Bartleman have anything in his bag for us tonight?
He does. I just want to cover one quickly, because, as you said, we do have a lot of story to get through tonight.
True.
But I had to cover this one pretty quickly, because a listener named Joe in Virginia wrote in and said that he just listened to episode 25. He says, and one thing jumped out at me. You all were marveling at how the construction of Gondolin took 52 years. Is that a long time for elves? In our world, building a city takes from 6 years, such as Constantinople, to 17, Haussmann's renovation of Paris. Construction in secret has got to be slower. Wikipedia tells me, and this is still Joe speaking, Wikipedia tells me the Cold War facility at Cheyenne Mountain took 9 years from planning to operations, which doesn't include nurseries, schools, granaries, football stadiums, or any of the other appurtenances of civic life. And we're humans, always in a hurry. Joe goes on to say, elves take their time. I think that's actually the secret of elven craft. An elf wants to become a silversmith, probably thinks nothing of spending 100 years practicing. Which brings me to my real question. Appendix D says the Quenya word yen, often translated year, really means 144 of our years. So did the construction of Gondolin take 52 years or 52 yeni?
Well, Sean, what do you have?
Well, I think I'll tackle the easy question first, and then maybe we'll talk about his other one. So the first one, or rather the last question, I guess. The 52 years are actually true years of the sun, our years, as opposed to yeni. The Grey Annals, which is in The War of the Jewels, History of Middle-earth, Volume 11, actually tells us that construction of Gondolin began in the year of the sun 64 and was completed in 116. So there's your 52 years.
There you go.
I think as Joe says, the yen is often translated as year. I think that's primarily before the rising of the sun, when time was just reckoned differently. And frankly, there really aren't more than about 4 yeni from the first rising of the sun when the Noldor returned to Beleriand to the end of the First Age. It's about 600 years.
That's
so
true.
That's something like 4.16 yeni or something like that.
4.16173. Just kidding.
Thank you.
I just made that up.
Sounded good. It sounded good.
It sure did.
So yeah, definitely true years of the sun, our years there.
Right.
As for the other part of the question, Joe does raise a good point. Is 52 years a long time for someone who's immortal? I really wanted to bring this into this episode tonight because we're actually going to see a character ask a very similar question in this chapter. And I think, we probably could have done a better job of pointing out that, 52 years is a long time for us as humans.
True. That's true.
Sounds like a long time. I found out, did a little bit more searching. Actually, Nargothrond took 50 years to build. So Gondolin, 52, that's not really outlandish.
So they're the same contractor, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's their problem.
All the same workers, they leave the Nargothrond site, they head over to the Gondolin site, schlep their tools on their back and everything. But it's true that they were kind of similar, right?
Yeah,
in terms
very
of their,
much so.
Not in terms of their design, but their purpose, I guess.
Right.
To be sort of the last
outposts, the last strongholds.
City standing, really. Yeah. And also are both described as real cities of with an economy and with a culture.
Yeah, very self-contained.
Yeah, exactly. And Joe made that comment about appurtenances of civic life. I don't know that there
That's
was
a
a
nice
football
phrase.
stadium in
Yeah.
Gondolin, but
Yeah,
you know,
I don't see that.
yeah. Whereas, it occurred to me that something like Aethel Syrian, which was truly a fortress just built right there on enemy territory or right on the border,
Yeah.
that probably went up much faster.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So ultimately, I think the point we were trying to make was that the elves of Gondolin did take their time. They did work in secret, and I'm pretty sure they built it to last. And I think Torgon probably would have loved to take more than 52 years because he certainly is nothing if not patient. But I think, I'm sure he had to deal with the realities of wartime and get something up quickly, as well as balancing secrecy and attention to detail at that. But still, I mean, 52 years is more time than I think we as humans can imagine to build a city. And I think that's really the point we're making.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially, for a human, that's the entirety of our adult life.
Right.
And it is hard to imagine beginning something that takes that long. Though, in fairness, the first thing I started thinking of were things like the cathedrals in Europe that would take, generations of builders to complete.
That's true.
Yeah,
Maybe even things like the pyramids. I'm thinking maybe.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
So.
Yeah, centuries perhaps.
Yeah.
I still blame it on the elf unions and their unreasonable demands. It's that's just the way it is. Oh man,
We just can't deal with these elf union negotiators anymore. Just Torgon
the health
comes home
insurance
from work,
demands
he's like,
are
"I'm
just ridiculous, and
I'm
they
up
want
to my neck in
pensions.
these."
They want pensions. They're going to retire at 200. They're going to live forever. We can't afford that kind of pension.
It's insane. Yeah. What are you going to do?
I don't know. Maybe it's the health and safety department. I don't. Elves could die from battle wounds and from sorrow and from really long falls.
From falling off of a wall. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's some
Being
good
crushed
points.
under gate number 6.
I can just see a sign now at each gate. We've been accident free now for X number of days.
Accident free for half a yen.
Half a yen. Good stuff. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. 52 years to an elf really isn't that long. I mean, apparently 12 years is too long for Feanor. Really.
Sure, yeah.
But 52 years isn't that bad. I mean, it took 4 times that length for Arathel to get tired of Gondolin. So
I was just going to ask. Yeah, I think it was 200 years. Yeah, before she
200 years before she wanted
200
to get
years
out there.
twiddling her thumbs before she finally said, "I'm leaving."
But then she was with the people of Kelligorm and Curufin for like a year before she got tired of that. And then she got tired of Eowel after, well, we don't know how old Macmillan was at that point. I do think there's a timeline that tells us when she got back there, and that would estimate when she left. But
I know I'm sure it's in the Gray Annals.
I'm sure it is. I just can't recall the exact length of time. But, Macmillan wasn't that old. So maybe 30, 40 years. Yeah. I don't know. I'm guessing. Truly, number pulling it right out of the dark, just pulling a number that sounds right.
Yeah, right.
It could have been 12, could have been 117. I don't know. But yeah,
someone is going to
someone's
write
going to
in with
an answer.
that.
Yes, they will.
Yeah. And that's fine.
Yeah,
Please do.
Please, always. We love to get your comments. We do. Well, except for the ones when you tell us we're wrong. Those we don't like so much. I give those to Sean.
It's usually me.
No,
you're doing a rare shooting from the hip right now with that 30 to 40 year thing.
Yeah, it's better than calling you Lou Reed instead of Lou Graham. I'm never going to live that down.
That's true.
Male rockers named Lou for 500, Alex. No. It was double jeopardy. And
I had a 50-50 chance. There was only 2 of them.
I know, exactly. That's a good point. There won't be a Jeopardy category called, rockers named Lou because they can't come up with 5 questions.
Right. It wouldn't be double jeopardy, but it would be double vision.
Oh. And on that beautiful note, we're on to today's discussion because otherwise we're going to ramble and ramble. Oh.
All right.
Well, before we begin, folks, we'd like to recommend that you ignore Sean. And then after you've done that, please pull up.
I'll be here all night.
Pull up the map of Beleriand at loaderproject.com. There's a lot of moving around the map tonight, and we want to make sure you're able to kind of trace or track the movements of various peoples and groups as they flee from the north. So we're We're going to start looking at the first part of the chapter. We're not going to read right away, but we want to take a look at those first couple of chapters. First couple of paragraphs. Fingolfin here starts out looking for a fight. He's itching for some action here. His people are numerous and strong, it says, and he knows that the men that they're allied to, and he's allied. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong. He's allied to the people of
Hador.
That's what I thought.
Hador's
Not Beor, but Hador's.
Well, it's not. Yeah. Right,
Yeah.
correct. I was going to say Marach, but I think we're a few generations on now, so I think it is the House of Hador at this point.
Malak, son of Marach, who had become, so he's allied really to the strongest of the men, and we know how steadfast Fingolfin is. So he knows, and he's right, that they are in danger as long as the siege is incomplete, and they can't make the siege complete because they can't get all the way around the north.
Yeah. And who knows what Morgoth is cooking up there? I mean, we know he's got Balrogs, we know he's got dragons. I still think he probably had some sort of mockery of dwarves planned, like just really twisted dwarves with really bad breath or something like that. But
okay then.
I'm sure he's working on something.
I'm sure he is. Yeah, dwarves 2.0.
Yeah, right.
Dwarves with bad breath. Sean.
Anti-dwarves. Dwarks.
Dorks. Well, and we find out, of course, that this is wise counsel, quote unquote, according to the measure of his knowledge. The fact is, he doesn't realize, he doesn't remember, or he doesn't want to remember that their war on Morgoth simply can never ever succeed without the aid of the Valar.
Right.
But he's right. As long as we do nothing, this isn't going to work. So he decides to try to move forward. There's a great quote. I think, Sean, you remembered this one.
Ulmo's words to Turgon. That remember that the true hope of the Noldor lieth in the west and cometh from the sea.
Cometh from the sea.
Yeah. So
that's a beautiful
that's
quote. And that's something that if, obviously he said that to Turgon, not to Fingolfin, but, that's the kind of thing that Fingolfin would have been wise to be aware of. But, he still wants to go out there and get this problem solved. So, kudos to him for wanting to get off his butt and get something done. But the other Noldor don't want to do anything. And worst of all is the sons of Feanor.
Right.
I'm sorry. Feanor puts it on his sons on his deathbed to hold to their oath and avenge me. But, no, we're fine.
We're cool.
Let him have those Silmarils. I don't really care.
Caranthir's got his little trade kingdom going on there,
Petty trade baron again.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's
interesting. It's that old don't go looking for trouble argument that is never the right counsel in Lord of the Rings.
It really isn't. No, none of Tolkien's works is that really good wisdom.
Yeah.
It's good. Well, we even heard that last episode, with Morgoth's emissary or spy who had been sent into the men's council, and he talked about, the orcs will leave us alone if we leave them alone, and
that's right.
Don't go looking for trouble. Yeah, really, really bad counsel.
No, I mean, exactly. Trouble is always going to come to you if you're a free person in Tolkien's world.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you don't have to go looking for a fight, but really you should probably take it to them while, the terms are better. And of course it like we said, it wouldn't have mattered. The designs came to nothing. And even if they had, it wouldn't have mattered. But I love that little foreboding. The land had peace yet for a while. It's just
for a while.
Classic Tolkien dread.
Yeah. Well, and it strikes me that it's again we know this in hindsight that this is not real peace. This is the peace of having a problem to deal with and not dealing with it. This is non-confrontational peace. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Really
it's like, I really have to have that uncomfortable conversation with my boss and I'm just putting it off. It's that kind of peace,
It's merely the absence of violence. It's not actual peace.
Right. Exactly. That's very well said.
Well, thank you. Every once in a while I come up with something. What do they say? A blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then.
Yeah, you got a few pearls rattling around up there in that head of yours.
A few brain cells, bump up against each other every now and then.
Yeah.
So we get we get the idea that Morgoth now has long prepared his force. So we get the announcement that sure enough there's going to be a bad thing coming. I love this that Morgoth's hate overcame his counsel. If he had decided to just wait a little bit longer, his victory would have been complete. He could have crushed them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But let's go ahead and start by starting with the next paragraph. I'll get us going here.
Okay, sounds good.
There came a time of winter, when night was dark and without moon, and the wide plain of Ardgallan stretched dim beneath the cold stars, from the hill forts of the Noldor to the feet of Thangorodrim. The watchfires burned low, and the guards were few. On the plain, few were waking in the camps of the horsemen of Hithlum. Then suddenly, Morgoth sent forth great rivers of flame that ran down swifter than balrogs from Thangorodrim, and poured over all the plain, and the mountains of iron belched forth fires of many poisonous hues, and the fume of them stank upon the air, and was deadly. Thus Ardgallan perished, and fire devoured its grasses, and it became a burned and desolate waste, full of a choking dust, barren and lifeless. Thereafter its name was changed, and it was called Anfauglith, the gasping dust. Many charred bones had there their roofless grave, for many of the Noldor perished in that burning, who were caught by the running flame and could not fly to the hills. The heights of Dorthonion and arid Wethrun held back the fiery torrents, but their woods upon the slopes that looked towards Angband were all kindled, and the smoke wrought confusion among the defenders. Thus began the fourth of the great battles, Dagor Bragolach, the Battle of Sudden Flame.
Oh, man.
Dagor Bragolach.
That is a word that just sounds horrifying.
Doesn't it?
You know? Yeah.
It does. And even Anfauglith sounds really miserable.
Yeah,
he
that's
does
true.
a great job with words that sound like what they ought to.
Yeah, that whole sound symbolism thing we've talked about, isn't it?
Exactly. Before we get deep into this, and I know we want to touch on several of the points here, I want to recap a timeline because I think that'll help us put this in context. We mentioned in the previous paragraph, the text talks about it being 455 years since the coming of Fingolfin. So we know that's also the same year that men awoke. The sun rose in year 1, so we're talking about 455 years later. Now, thinking back to the past several chapters, the Dagor Aglareb, the glorious battle, was in year 60. That's when they began the siege. So it's been, in this case, almost 400 years since then.
Right.
It was 200 years after that, or about halfway between then and now, that Glaurung came out and revealed himself over soon and was defeated by Fingolfin.
Yeah. Right.
50 years later, which is about 145 years ago, men entered Beleriand. So
that was
310.
What, 310? Okay.
310. So here we go, 145 years later, after men have come over. So 145 years after the incidents of last chapter, and now the siege ends and the Dagor Bragolach begins.
And that seems about right, because it does say that it's 6 generations of men after Beor and Marach.
Mm-hmm.
So, 6 generations.
And they were not yet come to full manhood, so they were still young.
Right. Yeah.
So more like 5 generations.
Good point, yeah.
And that's
so that makes sense. Yeah, you're looking at
30
about
years a generation.
30-year generation, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a pretty long time after men awoke, and a pretty decent, amount of time, even since the Dagor Aglareb. I mean, really, it's been almost 400 years since they established the siege. And other than Glaurung coming out, there hadn't been much for almost 200
really
years.
Done much. I mean, he's had these little raiding bands and things like that, but he's not really made a true effort to break the siege.
Right, and little affrays on the border here and there. But yeah, no real effort.
Right.
But, we see here in that paragraph just preceding what we read is that Morgoth could have been entirely victorious. I love this. He's not very imaginative, is he? He took, what does it say? He esteemed too lightly the valor of the elves, and of men he took yet no account.
Yeah, that is very fascinating to me. I mean, we saw how hard in the last chapter, we saw how hard he worked to keep men and elves separated.
Yeah.
But then having failed to do so, he just kind of forgot about that. And he's like, well, it's probably not a big deal anyway. Men probably aren't that strong.
Yeah.
And it's just that he's taken no account. He doesn't really know. But I don't know. It's just fascinating. It just seems like an incredibly foolish thing to do. And as we see, it was his hate that overcame his counsel. It's like he probably kind of talked himself into it.
Yeah.
Like I told you, I imagine him like standing in front of the mirror, just like talking to himself into it's like, you can do this, Morgoth. You can do this.
little self-motivation.
Those men aren't gonna. Yeah. It's like
Those men have nothing on you.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
You know, he took no account. It reminds me a little bit of when he fled, when he was in Amon, and he went after the Noldor specifically because he realized he couldn't reach the Vanyar. They were too, OMG Manwë. But he ignored the Teleri. He thought they were worthless.
Right, that's true. He thought they were worthless. Yeah.
And here he kind of thinks the men are too. It makes me wonder if really his whole purpose in trying to get to the men in last chapter was more about just trying to, get slaves and get some sort of weakness for the elves. Create a situation where at least they don't have more allies. But I don't think he saw them really as anything more than maybe cannon fodder for the elves.
Yeah, that could be
kind of the way he viewed his orcs. Really, pretty much useless except in really big numbers.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like he didn't really see any threat from men themselves. He just kind of saw them as, like you said, just extra cannon fodder.
Yeah.
That would distract him from the real threat.
Yeah, that would slow down his victory against the elves. So we get the sudden flame, and his timing was right. This is a new moon, so the sky is without moon. The night is dark. It's midwinter, and then just wham! These great rivers of flame, fires of poisonous hues.
Notice that the rivers of flame ran down swifter than Balrogs. They didn't fly down swifter than Balrogs. Just saying.
Just saying. We'll have another moment to talk about Balrogs, I think, later in this episode, too.
Yes, we will, yeah.
The fume of them
lava doesn't fly any more than Balrogs, yeah.
The fume of them stank upon the air. Now, I don't know, you and I each have very young children, so we probably have diaper pails. I think we understand what it means to have the fumes stank upon the air.
Stinking upon the air, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And poisonous hues, too. Definitely some poisonous hues inside those.
Oh, my goodness. Whoa. So, I have a feeling that these were worse.
Yeah, I think so. You know what this made me think of was, have you ever seen pictures of sulfur volcanoes?
I have not.
You look that up later. You can look up pictures of sulfur volcanoes, and they're in Indonesia.
Okay.
And they glow bright blue, like it's a bright purplish blue.
Wow. I can't imagine how bad they stink. Sulfur is nasty.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was the first thing I thought of when I read this, because I'd actually read a little article about these volcanoes a couple of years ago, and that's all I can imagine. It's just like these bright blue, like electric blue, lava pouring down the sides of Fingolfin, and just stinking of brimstone. I mean, it's just man,
like hell itself has just burst forth onto the earth.
Yeah.
Nasty.
It's crazy.
And so now an entire region dies and is now called Anfauglith.
Yeah. And this was Ard Galan. I mean, this was,
this is a beautiful grassy plain. This is like the Great Plains of the United States or the steppes of Russia, just getting in one fell swoop, just burned to a crisp.
Yeah. Oh, and this description. I mean, the detail in this description.
Oh, I know.
It just floors me. I mean, we talked about this a little bit. That Tolkien, obviously well-read man, knew his Pliny the Younger. Yeah. And I'm sure had read Pliny's eyewitness account of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in Pompeii, which was AD 79. I mean, there's just so many points of comparison. I mean, I was looking at Pliny after I read this recently, and it's just, I mean, he talks about the flames and the smell of sulfur. He talks about the broad sheets of fire and leaping flames coming down. He talks about dense fumes choking his uncle's breathing. By blocking his windpipe. I mean, really just vivid imagery. He lived through this, through this volcanic eruption. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, actually died.
Yeah.
Along with many, many, many people. Yeah. But man, just an astonishing amount of detail that Tolkien, I think, very consciously is probably using. It's probably the most vivid image of a volcanic eruption that's ever been written.
Yeah.
Except that, for the people of Pompeii, I mean, it was over for them within like a day or two,
12 hours and it's done.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't much, and then but for these guys in Beleriand,
It kept
it's
going.
just beginning.
Yeah.
So now they have to just like, can you imagine just going out to like march across pumice stones to where people have died,
And you're seeing
go march out to
skeletons
battle.
and charred
Yeah,
bones and
yeah, shocking.
oh, just disturbing and just deeply troubling what that would do to the morale of any approaching army.
Yeah,
I mean, not that I think at Morgoth at this point was ever expecting that an army would march across Anfalglith and try to go to the gates of Angband, but certainly it would have an effect if anyone tried. Those are great descriptions. I'm glad you remembered that. I have to admit, I've read that, but it's been many, many moons. I had not remembered it at all, so I'm grateful you did. Thanks for bringing that into the discussion.
Yeah, sure.
So we get, we're going to skip a few paragraphs, but we do get the mention of Glaurung again. Here he is in his full might. In his train were Balrogs. Was it a steam train or a diesel train? I don't know.
Choo choo.
Chugga chugga. Roar. Orcs in multitudes that they'd never seen or imagined. And like we said last time, Han Solo, I can imagine an awful lot, kid.
Right. Exactly,
I mean, the amount of orcs, it must have just been staggering.
Well, I mean, he's been breeding them for 400 years now.
Exactly. The longer this piece lasted, the worse it was going to be when it ended. And that's why if he'd waited just a little bit longer, it would have been complete.
Yeah.
And of course it was winter and they'd been doing this siege for 400 years. So they were kind of spread out. They weren't, and so many of them just get wiped out instantly.
Yeah. I like that detail that many of the stoutest were wiped out. It's excellent sneak attack move. You're not going to be able to defeat the stoutest when they're lined up for battle facing you.
Right.
You wipe them out when they're not expecting it.
Yeah. Use, in this case, kind of the equivalent of artillery, I guess, or tactical nuclear weapons in this case.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, the battle didn't end until the coming of spring. So this was months before this ended. And of course, war never wholly ceased, as the text says. So that's...
Yeah, right. Definitely a Cold War gets hot situation there.
Wow. Yeah, you're not kidding. I have to admit, is there something there? This is probably a bit of a stretch, but, Morgoth was always kind of enamored of extremes, right? He was extreme hot, extreme cold. So it makes sense that, the deep of winter would be when he would launch this. The fact that spring he kind of loses loses a little bit of
his steam. So yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking.
It could be right. You could be right.
It's not really his season.
Right. I look terrible in spring clothes. I just can't do it.
I'm a winter. My colors are a winter. The spring palette just doesn't work for me.
It's all blacks for me. I just can't do anything else. I can't do earth tones.
And pastels, forget about it.
You could be onto something. I mean, there's certainly a nice poetry to it ending in spring, but I think the idea of it being sort of temperate, I mean, he has always dealt in these extremes. Yeah. And, he struck out at a time of extreme cold. You said it was midwinter.
Midwinter, new moon. Yeah.
Right. With a weapon of extreme heat. So, I guess it does make sense that it's spring, this more temperate climate.
The onslaught grew less. It's, almost like, well, now the weather isn't his ally anymore. And so he, isn't going to press quite as much.
Right.
It's just a thought.
When you put it like that, it makes me feel like there's just again, I kind of said it was poetic. This idea that, in the cycles of time, spring will always win out. I don't know. I kind of like that. I got a seed of some nice little sentiment there that I haven't quite thought out, but I kind of like that. There's a little bit of the crown of flowers
spring always
on the broken king's head.
Winter always ends. Yeah, you're right. What's the line? Winter is coming. Well, so is spring, pal.
So is spring. Spring's right behind.
Spring's right behind it. So, you got a passage to read. We'll get to that in a second. I didn't mean to skip that, but so we get that there. Right now we get a big scattering. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that first before I have you read the section about Bara here. But this is where looking at Loader Project is going to be helpful. You're going to see that the biggest part of the Sindar goes south. Some flee into Doriath and strengthen up Thingol. Some go to Brithambar and Eglarest over in the Falas, over in Círdan's realm. Some end up in Nargothrond. Others go to Assyrian. So if you're looking at the map, you're going to see a full scatter. Some of them into that central area. And
truly all corners of the map, really.
Yeah, over to the west, down over to the southwest, all the way over to the east. And others go really far east, back over the mountains, and end up wandering homeless.
Yeah.
We'll talk specifically about Finarfin's line. Real quickly, the only mentions here are, of course, that Angron and Agnor were killed. Remember, they were in Dorthonion. That was their realm. They served as vassals of their brother.
Right.
Who was down in Nargothrond, safely away from all of this.
Yes.
Thanks, brother.
They're up in the front.
And just as, we talked about the Hador's house had aligned with Fingolfin, Beor's house had aligned with Angron and Agnor, and most of them were killed too, except for one. Tell us, Sean.
All right. But Barahir, the brother of Bregolas, was in the fighting further westward, near to the pass of Sirion. There King Finrod Felagund, hastening from the south, was cut off from his people and surrounded with small company in the fen of Serach. And he would have been slain or taken, but Barahir came up with the bravest of his men and rescued him, and made a wall of spears about him. And they cut their way out of the battle with great loss. Thus Felagund escaped and returned to his deep fortress of Nargothrond. But he swore an oath of abiding friendship and aid in every need to Barahir and all his kin. And in token of his vow, he gave to Barahir his ring.
Mm-hmm. Can we just say how important this particular passage is?
Yeah, that's right. It's a big one. You want to remember this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's Barahir has a son who we're going to get to know in the next chapter.
Yep.
We're going to see this ring again in depth.
This ring is going to play a major role in the next chapter.
And not just in next chapter, it's going to play a role in all the way down to the Third Age.
Yep, that is true.
It is, I don't want to throw any spoilers until next time, but most of you, who've read certainly will know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I love the vivid language in this that made a wall of spears about him.
Isn't that
you
cool?
You could just see them, a 360-degree circle, and they're having to just, kind of hack their way out of the battle.
Yeah.
But the king gets out of there, and thanks to the willing sacrifice of Barahir and his men. I shudder to think what would have happened to Finrod had he been taken. It's one thing to be slain; it's another thing to be captured by the Dark Lord. Yeah, the House of Beor does get decimated. Actually, far more than decimated.
Oh yeah,
it's more like
very soon.
More like a tenth survived. It's more like it.
Right.
Whatever the 90% estimated would be. Because people always use that word without quite knowing what it means.
No,
right?
No, people always say,
Shall we do our vocabulary lesson? Decimated, what dates back to when a Roman company would be a tenth of the men would be executed.
Right. Yeah. So like basically every 10th man.
Right.
Like they did. I actually had one professor taught me they actually would line them up and just they just walk down the line and like count to 10, cut off his head. Count to 10, cut off his head.
One,
but
two,
now we just
8, 9, 11.
That would have been a great. There should be a Life of Brian outtake with that or something.
Yes, there should.
I'm sure there's not.
Oh man, but that's dessa.
That word decimate now we use it in sports all the time,
and decathlon and
10,
decimeter and it's 10. So anyway, people say decimated and they usually mean more like entirely wiped out,
completely defeated. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, they just got decimated. Like, well, that's not really that bad, actually.
No, every 10th man of that football team did not get executed. Anyway, the House of Beor was more than decimated. At this point, probably about 10% of them had survived. So it was, I'm not going to even try to
it's got to be like a Nona something.
No, yeah.
But I love this strengthening of this bond between Finrod and Beor's kin. We saw in the last chapter how it was Beor's people that Finrod first encountered.
Yep, absolutely, and great love for them was stirred in his heart.
Right.
I love that.
Beor was his vassal for the rest of his life.
Yeah, which is what Beor means. Yeah,
exactly right. And so this is just a re-strengthening.
Reinforcing.
Reinforcing of that bond. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So just remember this passage, folks. This is one of the keys to the chapter.
Oh yeah.
Definitely remember the ring. So then he goes back to Dorthonion to take what is his rightful place, but most of his people had left and gone to Hithlum. So they'd gone quite a bit west and over with Malak's people, with the House of Hador.
Right.
So now we get to Fingolfin's lines. So we get Fingolfin and Fingon. I'm kind of breaking it down like we've done before, where we look at Finarfin's, the sons of Finwë, Finarfin, Fingolfin, and Feanor.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the only one that's still around is Fingolfin. Finarfin went back. He already, turned back. Feanor's, just blowing on the wind someplace. He's just kind of, all we are is dust in the wind.
Yeah.
So Fingolfin's line is Fingolfin and his son. They had been unable to come to the aid of the sons of Finarfin. They also were unable to come to my aid when I really shouldn't have tried to sing that song.
That's all right. Everybody's going to be so excited that we beat up on Feanor one more time. It's just,
I know, isn't that fun? We get to do that again. Hey, it's that Feanor pinata again. Whack, whack.
Right.
Now, they'd been driven back to the Ered Wethrin, to Aethel Sirion, and they barely were able to hold that. So, all of the fortresses of Ered Wethrin, of the Iron Mountains there. So they, were really struggling. They did not have the ability to go forward. They were barely able to defend their own lines. Hador, the Golden-Haired, and his son Gundor died defending Fingolfin's rear guard. So Galdor becomes the lord of those people.
Right.
But because, now
Galdor, the other son.
Right. The other, not Gundor, but his other son Galdor.
Right.
So here's the thing, Hithlum becomes this unconquered threat on the flank. They can't do anything really offensively. They can't, reunify with, Angron and Ignor because they're dead, or any of the other forces in Beleriand, but they are a threat, and that's important. Yeah. Morgoth, what do they say here? They've got a little bit. Well, neither Orc nor Balrog could yet overcome.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Neither Orc nor Balrog could yet overcome. No, Hithlum remained unconquered, a threat upon the flank. Yeah.
Right. But he was sundered from his kinsmen by a sea of foes. Boy, is that a picture.
Oh,
but neither Orc nor Balrog could yet overcome the power or the valor of the elves and the men of the North.
I think we need to talk about this because,
so
many people, probably everybody reading this is coming to it having read Lord of the Rings already. And in Lord of the Rings, a Balrog is the most terrifying thing, the most unconquerable foe that anybody faces. And obviously we're seeing here that Balrogs aren't any better at orcs at overcoming the power of elves and men.
That's true. They are kind of lumped in with the general infantry here.
Yeah, and we don't really know how many Balrogs there are here. There are certainly
we don't
places in the Silmarillion where we see lots of Balrogs in an army. A host of Balrogs is a phrase we get, I think, a couple of times.
Well, we'll get that in the Fall of Gondolin, and we'll get that...
spoilers, man. Come on.
It's a chapter name. I mean, I can't.
I know, but
I'm trying not to spoil anything.
Come on, we just figured out how long it took to build it.
Oh, I didn't say it actually fall. I just meant the chapter, the Fall of Gondolin. It's talking about the autumn.
No, it's not.
It's talking about autumn in Gondolin and how beautiful the leaves are.
Autumn in Gondolin is
those
so
russet-colored leaves and
sorry. Glingol and Belfil even changed leaves. That's
there you
go. Of the elven craft.
Or maybe that's just rust. They are metal after all. Oh goodness.
Yep. But
I hear what you're saying. Yeah,
I think it's just worth pointing out that we talked about this. There's no real clear answer why this is that Balrogs couldn't overcome elves and men. But I think we both are of the opinion that, we have seen before that these are elves newly come from Valinor.
Yeah. Not quite newly anymore.
Now.
This is
400 years.
Yeah, right.
But compared to the 7,000 years that are going to elapse between now and the War of the Ring,
they're definitely more near their peak.
Yes, exactly.
455 years is not that long. And men are at their peak. Men, especially these men, the Edain.
They are young. They
are young. They are 6 generations removed from becoming allied with the elves. So they're just at that point where they've learned, pretty much all they need to learn, and now they're at their peak. So it's not surprising to me that even the Balrogs couldn't overcome
I agree.
the valor of the elves and men of the north. But, it's also worth noting that, the mountains of Hithlum are an issue, but if the Balrogs could fly, they would have just gone over the mountains. Just to say that.
Just saying. Just putting
saying.
it out there. Oh, man.
So then we get Feanor's line. So we get the ward gone ill with the sons of Feanor. Well, gee, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
They really got shredded. Decimated. No, I'm kidding. Celegorm and Curufin were defeated. So they go south and they join Nargothrond. Poor Finrod.
Yeah.
I wish they hadn't,
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It doesn't even say it would have been better if they hadn't.
Yeah. Another one of those we can't have nice things moments, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Mithros is the only high point here. He retains the Hill of Himmering. It becomes a rally point. Maglor joins him after.
I love the fact that Mithros is just burning.
Isn't it? He's just rocking. Come and take this place.
Like a white fire. Yeah, since his torment. Oh man,
I love that line.
He's ready.
Isn't that awesome? Yep. That is where's that line? Like a white fire within. Oh man, orcs fled before his face. Nobody wants to even see this guy.
Yeah.
So that becomes this this rallying point. But really, the rest of that region is gone. Maglor's Gap is wiped out. Lothland is wiped out. Glaurung had come and really made that happen. So the fortress on Mount Rerir, Thargelion, Lake Helivorn, they're all lost.
Yeah, all lost.
Caranthir ends up fleeing south. Yep. So he goes. So Celegorm and Curufin go south to Nargothrond. Caranthir goes south and joins the twins, Amrod and Amras, and they go further south.
They go south. It's so like basically the only one who didn't have to leave home was Mithros.
Mithros, really, yeah. 6 out of 7. Bad news for all of them. And then we get to the highlight of the chapter, don't we?
Whoa.
This is what we've been waiting for.
I have been waiting for this since we started the podcast, Alan. I mean, this is just a...
It is a beautiful passage, and we're going to read it.
We're going to let it stand on its own.
And we're going to break this down into 3 portions. I'm going to read a bit that's kind of right up to the battle itself. Then we'll talk about that, and then we'll have Sean read a description of the battle itself, and then we'll talk about that. But really just listen to these words. This is such a great description, and I know that we're probably not going to do it great justice, but we'll do our best.
Yes, we will.
Then Fingolfin beheld, as it seemed to him, the utter ruin of the Noldor, and the defeat beyond redress of all their houses. And filled with wrath and despair, he mounted upon Rochalor his great horse, and rode forth alone, and none might restrain him. He passed over Dor Newfauglith like a wind amid the dust, and all that beheld his onset fled in amaze, thinking that Orome himself was come. For a great madness of rage was upon him, so that his eyes shone like the eyes of the Valar. Thus he came alone to Angband's gates, and he sounded his horn, and smote once more upon the brazen doors, and challenged Morgoth to come forth to single combat. And Morgoth came. That was the last time in those wars that he passed the doors of his stronghold. And it is said that he took not the challenge willingly. For though his might was greatest of all things in this world, alone of the Valar he knew fear. But he could not now deny the challenge before the face of his captains, for the rocks rang with the shrill music of Fingolfin's horn, and his voice came keen and clear down into the depths of Angband, and Fingolfin named Morgoth Craven and Lord of Slaves. Therefore Morgoth came, climbing slowly from his subterranean throne, and the rumor of his feet was like thunder underground. And he issued forth clad in black armor, and he stood before the king like a tower, iron-crowned, and his vast shield, sable unblazoned, cast a shadow over him like a storm cloud. But Fingolfin gleamed beneath it as a star, for his mail was overlaid with silver, and his blue shield was set with crystals, and he drew his sword Ringil that glittered like ice.
Man. That's just incredible. You know what I just noticed just now as you were reading it, the double Morgoth came.
Isn't
There's
that,
the
yeah.
and Morgoth came at the end of that paragraph, which is like the most famous 3 words in the Silmarillion, I think.
Yeah. Other
and
than,
then,
yeah, exactly. In the Silmarillion, it makes me think of, though, of Angrand roll, the line in the Battle of Pelennor,
Pelennor
Grond rolled on.
The other Grond, yeah.
Yeah, with Grond.
Yeah.
It made me think of that, but because it's just, and
that's a good
Morgoth
point.
came, and therefore Morgoth
and then later,
came.
therefore Morgoth came. It makes everything feel so slow.
Doesn't it?
Like it's just, yeah. Oh,
It's
just
like
plotting.
it's like time froze after
Yes.
the first and Morgoth came, and now we get kind of this this moment of fear, of genuine cowardice, craven, and then
can't deny the challenge in front of his
No.
captains. You can't let your buddies see you not standing up to the fight.
You know what's funny? I noticed for the first time was that he smote once more upon the brazen doors. Remember when they first came? When they first came over, he came all the way to the gates.
That's right.
And smote the gates, and then realized this isn't where we want. We're going to back away.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So
He had more wisdom than Feanor.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Gathered his strength for a few hundred years, came back and smote
once more.
upon
I
the
don't know
brazen
that
doors.
I've ever caught that.
I never caught it until now. That's great. Great catch.
I mean, I didn't even, even in my notes, I didn't. It's just only as I read that. But oh man,
I love the use of the word brazen. I mean,
Isn't that a
obviously,
great word.
Obviously, it's literal. The doors are made of brass.
But there's something else there, isn't there? Yeah.
I think so. I think there's a little bit of, what's really brazen here, I think, is Fingolfin himself, that other meaning of brazen, his boldness, his bold and without shame kind
Absolutely.
of. I mean,
he could have said,
man.
and brazenly smote once more upon the brazen doors
exactly.
if he was,
Right,
less
exactly.
artful.
Yes, exactly. It's beautiful.
And I love that he knew fear. We talked about this a little bit. How can he know fear? Why can he know fear when none of the other Valar do? I think there's a couple of things that jump out at me. One is in this passage, and the other is something that we'll get to a little bit later. But the first thing that jumps out is the fact that he's this lord of slaves. He uses fear as a tool. It is only fear that keeps his followers, if you will, in line. They're not like, woohoo, Morgoth 2016,
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I
think
yeah.
that is why I see that as an insult. And I know I should probably know better than to try and dig too deep for meaning in Elvish insults after the whole
the jail crow,
the jail crow incident of chapter
the great
7,
jail crow
that
incident of 2016.
Right, exactly. But I mean, I think that's what the insult is that you're a lord of slaves. Your people don't love you. They don't follow you for affection or loyalty. They follow you because they are slaves.
Yeah, because they're afraid of you.
Because they're afraid of you. Yep.
And I think it may be because he uses fear so well that he understands fear in a way that none of the other Valar could. But there's another reason I think we'll get to we'll get to in the next thing that I read. Yeah. But boy, this vision here of and there's so many wonderful pieces of art that come from this. But this picture of Morgoth standing like a tower, crowned with iron. We've got the Iron Crown again that we've talked about so many times before about that Iron Crown and what that represents. Yeah. And this big, massive shield that's in unblazoned sable. So it's basically like a matte black.
Just a plain black, yeah. If you're
no
you're not
shiny bits on it. Yeah, unblazoned just means it doesn't have any
kind of design
coat
on it.
Of arms
kind of,
or exactly.
Right.
And of course, sable is black.
Right.
And I love that. Tolkien doesn't use the words that.
He doesn't say he's got a plain black shield.
Right. Why would I say that when I can say sable unblazoned?
Right.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that's kind of a heraldic description, which you would expect of a shield.
Yeah,
but,
unblazoned certainly is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
sable, I think.
Yeah. I'm wondering because black of course has Germanic roots. I don't know what the roots are for sable. I'm not going to go word nerdy here on this one, but
I'm going to look that up now.
Of course you are. But the picture of this,
it's probably French because I think a lot of the heraldic words come from French.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Because he certainly doesn't have a fleur de lis on his on his shield.
No.
Or the lion, the lion, the raging lion. What do they call that?
Like the English. The
3 lions on
English
their
lion, the
soccer,
Plantagenet lion. Yeah.
Yeah, the Plantagenet lion.
Boy,
we digress. We digress. Congratulations. It only took us, 40, 45 minutes to digress. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Or at least to acknowledge our digression. But
Anglo-French from Middle Low German.
Okay, so it does have, yeah, okay. This picture of Fingolfin underneath, really just being dwarfed by this massive black entity, and areas gleaming like a star.
Are you thinking of the picture I'm thinking of? The
almost certainly
the John Howe.
Yeah.
I think it's called Fingolfin's Challenge, and I think we should probably
we should put a link up to that.
We should put a link up on our website. Yeah, I used to have that as my wallpaper.
That is such a beautiful work, and it is exactly the way I pictured it.
Absolutely. Well, except for one detail.
Well, yeah, the color of Fingolfin's hair.
Howe makes Fingolfin blonde, and I would say it's quite certain that he's dark-haired based on some notes in the Silmarillion.
Yeah, but this picture of him just almost a source of light coming from himself. He's got this silver mail, just super highly reflective. This blue shield set with crystals.
And there's like a ray of light just kind of coming off his shield,
Absolutely. And his sword that glitters like ice. And I think you were telling me, what does Ringil mean?
Ringil actually means cold.
Yeah.
It's definitely a meaningful
what a picture.
Simile there.
What a stunning, stunning picture that is in my mind.
And just the earth, the pitted earth around them, which we'll get to in my passage. But it's just such an astounding picture. And
agreed.
It's terrifying and beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, because you can definitely sense the doom that's here.
Yeah.
Why don't we go ahead and have you take those next couple paragraphs for us?
Okay. Then Morgoth hurled aloft Grond, the hammer of the underworld, and swung it down like a bolt of thunder. But Fingolfin sprang aside, and Grond rent a mighty pit in the earth, whence smoke and fire darted. Many times Morgoth essayed to smite him, and each time Fingolfin leaped away, as a lightning shoots from under a dark cloud. And he wounded Morgoth with 7 wounds, and 7 times Morgoth gave a cry of anguish, whereat the hosts of Angband fell upon their faces in dismay, and the cries echoed in the Northlands. But at last the king grew weary, and Morgoth bore down his shield upon him. Thrice he was crushed to his knees, and thrice arose again and bore up his broken shield and stricken helm. But the earth was all rent and pitted about him, and he stumbled and fell backward before the feet of Morgoth. And Morgoth set his left foot upon his neck, and the weight of it was like a fallen hill. Yet with his last and desperate stroke, Fingolfin hewed the foot with Ringil, and the blood gushed forth black and smoking, and filled the pits of Grond.
My goodness, that is such a powerful moment.
Chills all over.
It really is. I mean, the idea of facing a foe that Fingolfin had to know that he had no chance of truly defeating him. Yeah. But he knew he had to try.
He had to try.
And, this is Fingolfin, the steadfast and valiant. This is the guy that Feanor stuck his sword in his chest and said, basically, leave my father alone.
Right.
This guy is the brave one. This guy does the job. And he did a lot more than anybody else would be able to do in a one-on-one battle.
Yes, he did. He left a mark, man.
7 wounds. Mm-hmm. And he does it with his agility. He leaps away.
Oh yeah. What is it like lightning? Into lightning.
Lightning shoots from under a dark cloud.
Yeah,
and you can see,
and that's one of the great things about that John Howe picture. You just really see the motion,
that light,
and
really you do.
Yeah.
You're right. There's a really strong sense of motion in that piece.
Yeah.
And it's such a great visual description because, you've got this storm cloud and you've got Fingolfin. So the description of as a lightning shoots from under a dark cloud is very, apropos to him leaping away. And each time he leaps, each time he gets away, he's able to get, a small wound here and there. And it, not too small either. It's enough for Morgoth to cry out.
And his
anguish.
And his people, his hosts are scared. I mean, they are fearing for. They don't love their lord, but they're fearing
for his death, because if he loses,
if he dies, they're
next.
They're not going to do very well.
No.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a powerful scene.
And yet, Fingolfin is
he's incarnate.
He's flesh. Yeah, he's
flesh. Yeah.
I was about to say he's only human, but he's not.
Right.
But yeah, he is finite in power, certainly. Even
he does
more
get
so than
tired.
Morgoth.
Yeah. I mean, that's the really sad thing.
It is, isn't it?
Because it turns out he really was a match for Morgoth.
Yeah.
And it's only because he is a more finite being than Morgoth is.
That's true.
That he just gets tired.
And if Morgoth had been using, a weapon that didn't rent and pit the earth, who knows?
Yeah.
But
who knows? But,
that fatigue obviously led him. I mean, he'd been damaged, he'd been hurt, crushed to his knees. And his broken shield and stricken helm at this point. At this point he's not long for the battle.
Right.
But boy, just that description about the weight of his foot like a fallen hill.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah.
Fingolfin's doom right there. And yet he doesn't, he still
he gets one more massive stroke. And that the blood gushed forth black and smoking. It's such a, there's a little bit of victory in it. It's that one little victory before the end, but it's still just a gruesome image.
It is.
and the black smoking blood.
Yeah. But something tells me there's a pretty good welcome party for him, from
when he gets to Mandos. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, he still has to answer for the things that he did, following.
He and Tulkas are going to be swapping some. Some how
I fought Morgoth.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, exactly what I was thinking.
That's awesome. I love that idea. Well, let's go ahead and see what happens afterwards. This is interesting. This is also where we get some more, I think, about some answers about the fear that Morgoth felt.
Okay.
Thus died Fingolfin, High King of the Noldor, most proud and valiant of the elven kings of old. The orcs made no boast of that duel at the gate. Neither do the elves sing of it, for their sorrow is too deep. Yet the tale of it is remembered still, for Thorondor, King of Eagles, brought the tidings to Gondolin and to Hithlum afar off. And Morgoth took the body of the elven king and broke it, and would cast it to his wolves. But Thorondor came hasting from his eyrie among the peaks of the Chrysaegrim, and he stooped upon Morgoth and marred his face. The rushing of the wings of Thorondor was like the noise of the winds of Manwë, and he seized the body in his mighty talons, and soaring suddenly above the darts of the orcs, he bore the king away. And he laid him upon a mountain top that looked from the north upon the hidden valley of Gondolin, and Turgon, coming, built a high cairn over his father. No orc dared ever after to pass over the mount of Fingolfin, or draw nigh his tomb, until the doom of Gondolin was come, and treachery was born among his kin. Morgoth went ever halt of 1 foot after that day, and the pain of his wounds could not be healed, and in his face was the scar that Thorondor made. Well, I know you were upset with me for spoiling the fact that Gondolin falls, but we get a little bit of a spoiler here.
Yeah.
We even get the treachery was born among his kin, so...
Yeah, well, I think we've hinted strongly at that one in a couple episodes too.
Yeah, we said something back there about that guy, that kind of creepy cousin fella.
Yeah.
Wow. Again, another wow, right? This whole passage, I think that's why we had to break it up into 3 sections, because it's just so intense, and there's so much here, so much to talk about, so much to discuss. The first thing we get is that not only do the orcs not boast of it, but even the elves don't sing of it. And let's remember, there's not much the elves don't sing about. I was thinking, even the kinslaying had a little musical number. We don't get to hear it. But,
that's true. Yeah, there was the Noldolante.
Yeah, the Noldolante. And the elves of Lothlorien, even though they were, in mourning, sang a lament for Gandalf.
Right.
you know, this is intense that they don't
They
sing
don't
of it.
sing about that. Yeah.
You know, I mean, here's
Their
this
sorrow is
incredibly
too deep.
heroic thing, but yeah, there's sorrow. This is the High King of the Noldor.
This is the High King of the Noldor. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is the most valiant death I think
Yeah,
any Noldo has had. I mean, dying in battle with Morgoth.
yeah. I
Incredible.
really don't think that can be topped. You know, I mean, this is the only surviving son of Finwë here in Middle Earth. I mean, yeah, Finarfin's still over in Valinor, but you know, Finwë's gone, Feanor's gone. It's just Fingolfin's the only one left.
Right.
Yeah, what a moment.
Incredible moment.
And then I love the arrival of Thorondor.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
You know, we've talked about this before. Yeah, it's
Yeah. We always see the involvement of the Eagles as, you know, Manwë getting involved.
yeah. And I think
I mean,
even
I think it's pretty clear,
It
like
is,
the noise of the winds of Manwë.
yeah, I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah, no, I agree. But oh man, I love just, you know, what is it? He stooped on Morgoth and marred his face. Oh man,
He doesn't just, you know, distract him and then take the body. He's got to get his shots in.
Oh, he's good. Yeah, he's gonna right.
And
I
I
love
think
that. I
this
mean,
is
there's
Manwë
two-
punishing him. This is Manwë getting a little justice.
Yeah,
You know, yeah,
it's brilliant.
just amazing, beautiful stuff. So he
And
takes. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah, I was just going to say he takes the body and takes it north of Gondolin, and Turgon comes. Turgon, you know, his son. I'm sorry, his son.
his son.
Yeah, his son. I was thinking of Fingon.
Fingon is the other. Yeah,
Yeah. So Turgon comes and, you know, builds a cairn over his father. Just what a moment, you know?
yeah. And you get the idea that it's such a holy place. No orc would ever go there ever again.
Yeah. This is, you get a few of these moments, don't you? There are a few others. We'll see one,
Yeah.
you know, in the next chapter.
I know what you're
and,
thinking of, yeah.
And we'll see one in Turin. You know, where certain spots where certain people are
Where certain
buried.
people are laid to rest.
Yeah, become, you know, almost holy places, sacred.
Yeah.
Definitely. And there's something to be said for that. There's even some that are said to have survived the fall of Beleriand, if I'm not mistaken. So at least one,
You are correct. Yeah. Well.
which we'll get to.
Yeah.
But this
Sometime next year.
Yeah, sometime next year. Sometime probably about April,
Or
I think.
sometime this year, since it's now 2017, which I keep
That
forgetting.
is true. That is true, folks. I think you just caught the fact that we are recording this in late December.
No, that's not it at all. I'm still writing 2016 on all my checks. That's all it is.
Oh, they know. They know. They know. We have lives. We have to build up enough of a cushion, you know, and it's not like the material is going to change.
This is true. This is very true.
I mean, we couldn't record a podcast about the news and have it delayed by even a day. But luckily Tolkien's not doing any editing of the Silmarillion.
Still publishing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I am blown away by how many works continue to be published.
Yeah, he's more what's the word? Not lucrative. What's the word I'm thinking?
Yeah, but
I don't know.
Prolific. Prolific
He's more
is the word you're
prolific.
looking
Thank
for.
you. Prolific, lucrative, same thing.
Alan to the rescue with the word you need.
No, it's like I mean, he's like Tupac with all the stuff that he's getting out there.
Did you really say that?
Yep, I did.
Oh goodness. Okay. On that note,
on that note, let's go back to the story.
The fear, the fear. I think we see something here about that. We don't. I'm sorry. We have to make an inference here, right? Morgoth went ever halt of 1 foot after that day. The pain of his wounds could not be healed, and in his face was the scar that Thorondor made. What do we know about the Valar and their ability to become well, not so much incarnate, but clothe themselves?
It's raiment. They can change it anytime they want. That means that they can.
Yeah.
They can. That means that if you get tired of one body, you can drop it and pick up another one. Morgoth can't do that anymore.
Exactly.
Morgoth can't even heal the body he's got.
That's incredible, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a guy, you know, the most powerful, created at least. When he was created, he was the most powerful of the Ainu. And yet now he can't even heal his own.
He's lost the ability to even just heal his body, not even
let alone change.
Not
it.
even jump out of it and get into a new one. He can't even heal.
No.
And we saw how much we talked about this a few times when we read it earlier. How he spent his power.
Yes, that's the thing. His power is still finite. As great as it is, it's finite. And when you spend it, it's gone.
Right, and he spent it on just marring the earth and filling his minions with evil.
Yeah.
It actually reminds me quite a bit of what will happen with Sauron later, and I think I'm not spoiling that for anybody.
No.
The fact that Sauron can't take physical form anymore because he's put so much of himself into the ring.
Exactly.
And you had a great observation about the similarity there.
From Morgoth's ring, there's a quote that says that just as Sauron concentrated his power in the one ring, Morgoth dispersed his power into the very matter of Arda. Thus, the whole of Middle-earth was Morgoth's ring.
Mm-hmm.
So, that analogy.
So now you understand the reason for that title.
Morgoth
did not have a literal ring. It was Arda. Yeah.
Yeah. That's just, I'm trying to find.
I think it explains so much about the nature of Arda marred. We've thrown that phrase around quite a bit. But it's Arda is marred because of what Morgoth has done to it, but because Morgoth has put his power into it.
Yes.
And I think that's key.
Yeah. But definitely, this investment of power, of finite power. There was a passage you mentioned, you kind of alluded to it, where he sunk so much power into his creatures, and with the lust of evil, if I remember correctly. Was that the phrase?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can find that, because that's such a powerful phrase, and I'm trying to see if I can find that. Here we go. It's chapter 9, The Flight of the Noldor. There it is.
Their Dark Lord filled them with a lust of ruin and death. Is that the one you're looking at?
Actually, it was this one, that his hatred devoured him, and in the domination of his servants and the inspiring of them with lust of evil, he spent his spirit.
Okay.
So,
I just opened up my book and I found that part from chapter 10, but you're a few chapters earlier, aren't you?
Yeah, that's chapter 9. That literally talks about him spending his spirit. So,
you're right.
And I think we talked about it at that point that now he's locked in, and he's in a bit of a bind now.
Yeah, he's on a fixed income of evil now.
His pension check is rather small.
Yeah, if he spends it, that's it. He can't just work overtime and get more.
He's having to live on evil cat food.
Oh man.
Why's
he got to have a cat, man? Come on.
Well, he's Morgoth. We're not going there though. Oh no, that's Sauron.
To build up bunch of cats. That's right. Yeah.
The cat thing. But I think that's only because Tolkien viewed cats as evil, didn't he?
Yeah, I know. What did he say there of the fauna of Mordor?
He's a dog guy, not a cat guy.
Yeah.
But boy, I think we just lost.
Nobody's perfect.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know I'm a cat. You know I'm a cat.
I know you are. I still like you, but that's, because you're 2,000 miles away and that helps.
Yeah.
Otherwise I'd be sneezing.
Come over and hang out with my cat. Pet my kitty, Alan.
No, thank you. Oh, goodness. All right. We're going to move on to Bara here.
Okay.
You've got a little passage to read for us here that I think lists a few important people.
Yeah. All right, I'll jump right into that one.
Yeah, let's do it.
Now Morgoth's power overshadowed the Northlands, but Barahir would not flee from Dorthonion, and remained contesting the land foot by foot with his enemies. Then Morgoth pursued his people to the death until few remained, and all the forest of the northward slopes of that land was turned, little by little, into a region of such dread and dark enchantment that even the orcs would not enter it unless need drove them. And it was called Delduath, in Tower Nufuin, the forest under nightshade. The trees that grew there after the burning were black and grim, and their roots were tangled, groping in the dark like claws. And those who strayed among them became lost and blind, and were strangled or pursued to madness by phantoms of terror.
Wow.
At last, so desperate was the case of Barahir that Emeldir the Man-Hearted, his wife, whose mind was rather to fight beside her son and her husband than to flee, gathered together all the women and children that were left, and gave arms to those that would bear them. And she led them into the mountains that lay behind, and so, by perilous paths, until they came at last with loss and misery to Brethil. Some were there received among the Haladin, but some passed on over the mountains to Dorloman and the people of Galdor, Hador's son. And among those were Rian, daughter of Belegund, and Morwen, who was named Elethwin, that is Elfsheen, daughter of Baragund.
Okay.
So these are some important people.
They are some important people. Very important.
Certainly some of the last ones mentioned there. Yeah.
Rian and Morwen are very important.
Yeah. So just to clarify, Belegund and Baragund, their fathers. So Belegund and Baragund were brothers, if I recall correctly. So yes. Rian and Morwen are first cousins.
Yep.
We'll probably talk about that again later when we meet their sons.
Yeah. When we get to
I love the fact that Barahir, despite the fact that Morgoth's power is spreading.
Yeah.
Barahir is not. He's not.
He
moving.
does not retreat.
This is the good kind of stubborn, I say.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe not that smart, but But it's valiant.
It is valiant, and I love what ends up happening to this land. I mean, oh my goodness, what a horrible place.
Yeah.
The Delduath, Taur Nufuin.
Yeah.
This description of the idea that people truly lose their minds. I mean, it's those. And were strangled or pursued to madness by phantoms of terror. Mm-hmm. It's like Cthulhu-esque,
right.
Yes, exactly. Literally losing their minds.
Literally losing your mind, yeah. Sanity points. Sanity
points. Good stuff. And Imeldir, what a cool little, this is all we hear about her. We never hear about her again. But
I want to know more. I want to know more about Imeldir the Man-Hearted. She reminds me of... oh gosh, what's that lady's name? Starts with A-O. A-O something?
Eowyn?
It'll come to me. No, she's like the...
Oh, yeah.
She's the first
Her
Eowyn.
mind is rather to fight, absolutely.
Yeah.
I noticed that she's the man-hearted rather than the man-faced, which is probably a good thing. She didn't have the mustache going.
Yeah, good thing for Bauer here. Sure.
Sorry. Every once in a while I have to inject something really stupid and silly in the show.
Was it Galadriel whose name was Man-Maiden?
Nerdanel, or it was
as Nerwin.
That's yeah.
Nerdanel was
Nerdanel was not. That was a name. That was an actual different person.
Yeah, that was Feanor's wife.
Yeah. But it was Nar something.
Nerwin.
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
It was definitely Man-Maiden, which is a little on the kind of. Is that a compliment side?
Doesn't seem like. Yeah, no.
No,
I guess it's probably like this one, kind of, strong-hearted.
Yeah, exactly. No, this one is a compliment. Man-hearted. I mean, she's tough as nails.
Yeah.
Don't cross her.
Oh yeah, not at all.
And a pretty tough road. Looking at the map, they must have come down through the Pass of Anak, and then the rest of them, of course, that was all the women and children, while some remained among the Haladin. And like we said, the others went over to Dorloman, which we'll see them again shortly.
Which is a pretty long road, yeah.
It's a very long road. But yeah, that's a very important one because those are the ones that we're going to get back in touch with in
really see more of
upcoming chapters.
Yeah.
So there are 12 men that stick with Barahir. Baron, his son, Baragund and Belegund, his nephews, the sons of Bregolas, and then 9 servants who. They list the names, but we'll never have to know them again. Though we will.
Their names are long remembered in the songs of the Noldor, it says, but I don't remember them. So no.
Gorlin the Unhappy, though I do remember Gorlin the Unhappy, but
you don't forget a name like Gorlin the Unhappy.
Well, you don't forget it because of what happens. Remember, he plays a significant role in one of the upcoming stories.
Yeah, he's the one who's more.
He's the weak link in the chain.
Yeah, that's right. It has to do with why he's unhappy.
Yes, it does. Yes, poor guy. My heart goes out to him. But yeah, if you're unhappy enough that your nickname is Unhappy, that is sad. That really is pretty bad. I mean, you've got 8 other guys and none of them are listed as unhappy.
Right.
But
no.
Even though they're a desperate band and without houses and wives and kids.
They're all living in the twisted forest of madness, but only Gorlam is the unhappy.
Yeah, so now they're all homeless. And dead.
And dead.
Yeah.
And very dead.
Very, very dead.
Very dead.
Oh, goodness. Well, so we move on a little bit. Again, this is one of those things where we just have to jump because this is what the chapter does. We move on just, from different stories to different stories. So now we get the first real appearance of Sauron in the Silmarillion. I mean, I think he's shown up a couple times, but this is the first kind of lengthy presence.
Yeah,
that we
first
get,
time he's really done a whole lot. So
or anything. Yeah. So this is good. So I'm going to go ahead and read starting in the middle of the next paragraph. But at length, after the fall of Fingolfin, Sauron, greatest and most terrible of the servants of Morgoth, who in the Sindarin tongue was named Gorthaur, came against Orodreth, the warden of the tower upon Tol Sirion. Sauron was become now a sorcerer of dreadful power, master of shadows and of phantoms, foul in wisdom, cruel in strength, misshaping what he touched, twisting what he ruled, lord of werewolves. His dominion was torment. He took Minas Tirith by assault, for a dark cloud of fear fell upon those that defended it, and Orodreth was driven out and fled to Nargothrond. Then Sauron made it into a watchtower for Morgoth, a stronghold of evil and a menace. And the fair isle of Tol Sirion became accursed, and it was called Tol Ingaurhoth, the Isle of Werewolves. No living creature could pass through that veil that Sauron did not espy from the tower where he sat. And Morgoth held now the western pass, and his terror filled the fields and woods of Beleriand. Beyond Hithlum, he pursued his foes relentlessly, and he searched out their hiding places and took their strongholds one by one. Sauron, hey,
Good
welcome.
old Sauron, hello.
Welcome, hey,
welcome
old
to the
friend.
stage, Sauron.
Yeah, a lot here.
Taking over a place called Minas Tirith. Where do you get that idea from? I don't know. Well, I guess this is where he got that idea from, actually.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, Minas Tirith. I know what to do about that. Take it over.
I took one of those before, didn't I? Seem to remember something
I'm
like
sure he's
that.
like, why don't they name their cities anything else?
Right?
I took one before.
Why?
I'm going to take it again.
Why did they name this city after the place that I took over before? I don't know.
I mean, here you are on the...
Well, they wanted to call it Minas Anor, but no.
Maybe they should have kept it that way. I don't know.
Should have, yeah.
Because, Minas Tiriths have a bad record now.
Exactly, yeah.
In terms of battles with Sauron.
Now they're 1 for 1.
Yeah, that's true. 1 for 2.
In hindsight.
1 for 2, yeah.
One.
Right? Well, didn't
well, yeah.
they
1 for
survived
2,
the second one? I mean,
I'm thinking 1 and 1.
1 and 1, yeah, not 1 for 1.
Yeah, 1 and 1, not 1 for 1.
Yeah, there we go. So Sauron comes, takes it by assault. I love this little dark cloud of fear fell upon those that defended it.
Yeah.
Doesn't that feel very much like how he, attacks and takes over things later too?
Yeah.
It's that fear.
Definitely using fear as a weapon. I'm thinking of the heads and the catapults.
Oh goodness, yeah, boy, that was real, nasty assault. Orodreth, we should discuss him a little bit because I think we touched on this the first time we mentioned him. But there were some changes during the drafts. What do you have on that?
Yeah, so I mean, in the Silmarillion, which is what we're reading, and where I think we need to stick to.
Yeah, we need to land on that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he is Finrod's brother, the second son of Finarfin.
Right.
In History of Middle-earth, Christopher Tolkien, and I can't remember which volume it's in, but
I don't either.
Christopher Tolkien says that he thinks he may have actually even made a mistake in making Orodreth the second son of Finarfin, Finrod's brother, because he thinks later on his father intended to actually make him a son of Angrod. So he would have been Finrod's nephew.
Okay.
Now, the role he plays, for the most part, is still the same. He's still the guy who flees Minas Tirith. He's still the guy who does something else. Who would
later on, kind of not be such a great steward of
something. So but,
trying to avoid spoilers. It's not easy, folks.
We're trying to. If Tolkien doesn't spoil it, we're not going to spoil it for you.
That's our goal.
But there's a couple of different versions out there. I guess I mainly just point this out for anybody who's listening on, starts looking stuff up online. You will see a couple of different versions of Orodreth's parentage. We're reading the Silmarillion, so for us, he's Finrod's brother.
Yeah, and
that's kind of how we want to keep it. Actually, the other thing is the the other thing that gets mixed up with that is Gil-galad, which we didn't actually talk about him, but he was mentioned in the page or two back about he was Fingon's son in the Silmarillion, and his parentage actually changes along with Orodreth in the history of Middle-earth. I think
he becomes,
actually
a grandson of
he's definitely directly descended from Orodreth. I don't know if he's his son or his grandson, but well, I don't know. But for our purposes in the Silmarillion, Gil-galad is Fingon's son, and Orodreth is Finrod's brother. So
yeah, and that's all we got to know for now.
That's all we got to know for now. When we get to History of Middle-earth in 2037, we'll talk more about the other versions of Ord.
Boy, you're optimistic. Well, before we go on, I want to touch a little bit, but I don't want to go too deep, especially because, we're going to be short on time if we're not real careful. But this notion that Sauron, that the Isle of Tol Sirion becomes Tol in Gaurhoth, the Isle of Werewolves. We also see that Sauron is the Lord of Werewolves. Because we're going to touch deeply on werewolves in the next chapter, probably not in the first portion of that chapter, but maybe in the second portion, we want to save some of that. But I did, do a little bit of initial research. I think we'll do some more between now and then, because there are appearances of wolves, werewolves, and then later in the Legendarium, in the Lord of the Rings, and in the Hobbit, wargs.
Right.
And there's really a question: is what is the difference between each of these three? I think we can all agree that wolves are simply wolves. They are the animals. They are not, inhabited by any spirit, and they are not evil. They are just simply carnivorous beasts. But wargs are different.
Just common wolves, basically.
Right, they're just common wolves.
Common wolves.
Right, wolves are wolves. Wargs, what are wargs and what are werewolves, and what's the difference? One thing I found was a footnote in letter 297 that sheds a bit of light on wargs. It doesn't mention werewolves, but I think it might help us to understand werewolves maybe kind of tangentially. In that letter, he's talking about the presence of Anglo-Saxon words in his works. And he says that the word warg, used in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings for an evil breed of demonic wolves, is not supposed to be Anglo-Saxon specifically, and is given primarily Germanic form as representing the noun common to the Northmen of these creatures. The key part there is evil breed of demonic wolves.
Right.
It would seem from this comment, at least, that wargs are a breed or subset of wolves, but that they are inhabited by demonic spirits. The thing is, I kind of thought that's what werewolves were. So we'll discuss this more, but, I think you came up with a really good potential analogy that might work. What was that? It was.
It's, and I'm not sure about this. It's just something I've been speculating on. I want to look more into. I wonder if there might be sort of a hierarchy of, or maybe an analogy of wargs to werewolves being very similar to the difference between Huorns and Ents.
Yeah.
Remember, in Two Towers, we get, obviously we know the Ents. There's a few of them. They're very powerful. They're very sentient. And then I think, I don't have it in front of me, but Treebeard talks about how over time some of the Ents became more tree-ish, some of the trees became more Entish, and it's sort of that in-between place where you get the Huorns. They're not quite as sentient as the Ents,
but they do have a spirit. Like they're more, but they're more like a herd of cattle or a herd of sheep, and the Ents are, the
whereas
sentient
the Ents
shepherds.
are truly sentient beings,
Yeah.
So I wonder if that analogy might help us with wargs versus werewolves.
I get the feeling that it's I'm not. I don't know that we can be sold on. We haven't done enough research, but I think that's probably leaning in the right direction in the sense that werewolves, are the more powerful and rarer entities. We don't see werewolves in Lord of the Rings. We don't see them. We hear of them. Gandalf has a line that he talks about Sauron has many servants, including wargs and werewolves, suggesting that they are different. That's, I think, the part where I really struggle. But we'll talk more about that.
And we only see a couple of werewolves in the next chapter.
Oh yeah, they're very very important. Yeah,
and they're very very sentient.
Very. Yeah.
And so I think that
they seem like
you know,
Maiar type spirits. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, we'll get more in
or
that.
something, or something like some kind of Feyar. I don't know what kind. Maybe it's not like the Feyar of elves. Maybe it's greater than that. I don't know.
That's true. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
but then you compare that to wargs, whereas wargs are maybe not quite domesticated in Lord of the Rings, but and the Hobbit.
Ridden. They're ridden as
they're beasts of burden.
Well, in the Hobbit they talk, but I have to say I think I want to take that with a grain of salt. I want to look more at Lord of the Rings as being, more consistently accurate, in terms of that internal consistency, because in the Hobbit we had a few other things that kind of we never really see again in terms of talking creatures. But I don't know. We'll get more into that. I think there's one thing I wanted to read was this line from the Lay of Leithian that I found that talked a little bit about this. We talked about the evil breed of demonic wolves. Here he's talking about the werewolves. He says, "Fierce hunger-haunted pack he had, that in wolvish form and flesh were clad, but demon spirits dire did hold." So once again, we get this demonic spirit sort of thing. So we'll talk more about it next time. We just kind of wanted to give you guys a heads up that, hey, we are going to look into this. And it's fascinating that, I don't think we're talking about werewolves the way our modern culture thinks of werewolves in terms of men that turn into wolves at the howling of the, the full moon.
No.
They're wolves. They're just greater wolves.
Right.
Mega wolves.
Uberwolves.
Uberwolves. I love that. Uberwolves. Man.
You're right. It's not, you don't think of werewolves as, something that spreads. You get bitten by a werewolf and then you turn into one.
This isn't Michael J. Fox getting a little hairy and, howling at the moon.
No, I went to American Werewolf in London. That was the one I was thinking of.
Oh, okay.
But I
of
love
course, I'd go to Teen Wolf.
No, they're both great movies.
I'm a child of the '80s, man. I mean, that's all I can say.
Yeah, no, they're both classics.
Well, we've talked about werewolves. Now let's talk about Feanor's favorite subject: thralls.
You keep on using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
But now we find out what it really means.
Now we find out what it really.
Why don't you take this passage?
All right. Many of the Noldor and the Sindar they took captive and led to Angband, and made them thralls, forcing them to use their skill and their knowledge in the service of Morgoth. And Morgoth sent out his spies, and they were clad in false forms, and deceit was in their speech. They made lying promises of reward, and with cunning words sought to arouse fear and jealousy among the peoples, accusing their kings and chieftains of greed and of treachery one to another. And because of the curse of the kinslaying at Alqualande, these lies were often believed.
Yep.
And indeed, as the time darkened, they had a measure of truth, for the hearts and minds of the elves of Beleriand became clouded with despair and fear. But ever the Noldor feared most the treachery of those of their own kin who had been thralls in Angband, for Morgoth used some of these for his evil purposes, and feigning to give them liberty, sent them abroad. But their wills were chained to his, and they strayed only to come back to him again. Therefore, if any of his captives escaped in truth and returned to their own people, they had little welcome, and wandered alone, outlawed and desperate.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted that read, but there's not much to say beyond what that says, is there?
Yeah, it's pretty much right there on the surface. I mean, I think the one thing I guess I would point out is this idea of harkening back to the kinslaying.
Yeah.
We saw that treason and the fear of treason
exactly
were Mandos's words, and that's exactly what we're getting here. This isn't even some of these thralls are working for Morgoth, so I guess there is treason there of a sort. They certainly aren't willingly treasonous.
Right, exactly, not willingly, no.
But that is treason of a sort. But it's also just the fear of treason is just kind of eating away at the Noldor, and
so much so that even when people genuinely escape, they're
not trusted. No. Yeah,
and we'll run into one of those in a future chapter.
Yeah,
some good stuff. So let's take a look and see how he deals with men.
Okay.
To men, Morgoth feigned pity if any would hearken to his messages, saying that their woes came only of their servitude to the rebel Noldor, but at the hands of the rightful lord of Middle-earth they would get honor and a just reward of valor if they would leave rebellion. But few men of the three houses of the Edain would give ear to him, not even were they brought to the torment of Angband. Therefore Morgoth pursued them with hatred, and he sent his messengers over the mountains. It is told that at this time the swarthy men came first into Beleriand. Some were already secretly under the dominion of Morgoth and came at his call, but not all, for the rumor of Beleriand, of its lands and waters, of its wars and riches, went now far and wide, and the wandering feet of men were ever set westward in those days. These men were short and broad, long and strong in the arm, their skins were swart or sallow, and their hair was dark as were their eyes. Well, not surprisingly, anytime they don't listen, Morgoth hates them and chases after them. Don't listen to me? Fine, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah, always. I love that he calls the Noldor the rebels.
The rebel Noldor.
I mean, okay, and yeah, they are rebels, technically. But, I mean, come on, really? Who's really the rebel here?
You can see him now trying to find out the location of Gondolin. I tire of asking this princess, where is the rebel base?
Where is the rebel base?
The rightful Lord of Middle Earth.
They're in Vinyamar.
They're in Vinyamar. That's awesome. That's awesome. Oh, man.
Well, Princess Leia and Aradel both wore white.
That is true. Boy, that's well done.
Thank you.
Oh, man. So they, even when they're brought to Angband, the Edain basically, no. And I love that he wants to call himself the rightful Lord of Middle Earth.
Right.
That's comedy gold
exactly.
Right there.
Yeah, it's like, well, yeah, I know. That's
the rightful Lord.
Rightful Lord of Middle Earth.
I name this unto myself, and this unto myself. That makes me the rightful Lord.
Yep.
We do have to talk about the swarthy men. I think we'd be doing an injustice to not at least point out that the presence of the swarthy men, and then later on in Lord of the Rings, the Southrons and the Easterlings, raises the specter of race. And I don't want to attribute any particular thing to Tolkien himself. Certainly not without more grounding. We're not here to do gender criticism or race criticism or anything like that of Tolkien's works. We're here to explore the story. But we understand that this, this is an issue that, we can't ignore that it's there. You had mentioned a book that I don't think either of us have read, but we would still recommend.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, after reading this again, I'm definitely going to go pick it up.
Yeah, it is on my short list. Yeah.
Yeah, a friend of the show and one of our first guests that we've had on the show.
Yeah, one of two.
One of the two. Dimitra Fimi has actually written a book called Tolkien, Race, and Cultural History, which it's available, Amazon, all the usual places.
Well, and knowing Dr. Fimi, it's going to be a well-researched project. And it's going to be extremely well-written and accessible.
Absolutely.
She and Dr. Higgins did A Secret Vice, as hopefully our listeners know.
Right.
That's a tremendous piece on linguistics and philology. But this really does. I mean, it is near the top of my list. I want to go back first and read Splintered Light. But this is right up there.
That's a good one too.
On the top 2 or 3 books that I need to read next.
Yeah,
so
and
I would recommend tackling that.
Definitely. And just looking at what it's about, it seems like it does go into, race in Tolkien, and also sort of the continuum of the works that Tolkien was kind of working with as his sources, kind of tying all that together. I think it'll just be a really interesting and enriching read that'll probably help us come to terms with some of this stuff.
Kind of get our arms around where he's coming from in this.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's talk about the swarthy men. What that means. What does the word swarthy mean? We get that their skins were swart or sallow. Well, swart is going to be what cognate with German schwarz, which is black.
Right.
Their skins, and it can mean black, but it can also mean dark brown. Sallow can mean anywhere from light brown to yellow.
Right.
But interestingly, they're short and broad. So And they say later on that they, had greater liking for the dwarves. In some ways, they almost remind me of dwarves in the sense that they are, short and stocky. These are not, tall, long, lanky build. So I don't know if they're, my first thought isn't that they're specifically based on one ethnic group, despite their skin color. Right, on an actual Earth ethnic group. Because
I am inclined to agree with that.
Yeah.
Because I think he's very careful to give them their own
to give them something distinctive. To give them something distinctive. Yeah. Yes, they have brown skin. But, he doesn't, and their hair is dark, but he doesn't talk about their hair being, tight and curly or anything that would make them, then they must be, African or they must be, this. And the fact that they're short and broad kind of takes it out of that realm just a little bit. I don't want to be insensitive to the fact that, hey, this is still an issue and there are going to be some folks who see this as a problem. I don't know enough to make it a problem yet. Truthfully.
I know exactly what you're saying. The one thing I would add to that is, what we see is they're not all bad.
No, that's true. Boar's a very good guy.
Yeah, exactly. They're just a different race that is not as closely related to the Edain, not closely related to the Edain at all.
No.
But like all the races, there's good ones, there's bad ones.
Yeah,
and
there are plenty of these men that came over that we know ended up being bad. The ones that went off, earlier and said, "I'm out of here. I'm not going to help the Eldar." And went back over to the mountains and are lost to the songs of those days.
Right. And I would say that, we get that with every race of Tolkien, even elves. There's good ones and there's bad ones.
And dwarves. So, we know that dwarves fought on both sides of many battles as well.
And Edain,
Yeah.
So...
men. I don't know about the Edain. The three houses of the Edain are...
Well, I will say later
true.
On.
Yeah.
You look at like the Numenorians.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely
so,
true.
It's definitely here. Race is definitely mentioned here. I agree with you. I'm not quite sure what to make of it. I'd like to read more about it. But I would just advise everyone. Look, let's
for now look at it from a story perspective.
For now, look at it from a story perspective, and see
internal
it for what
consistency within the world. This isn't let's set aside kind of our natural tendencies in this modern day and age to look for. To look for hidden meaning, that speaks to, a power gap.
To some real, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well said.
Well, thank you. It's easy for me to say I'm a white guy, but, I'm trying to,
it's right there with you. But, we're men of the modern age and, we do our best to be sensitive to these things.
Exactly. And, I just don't want to over-apply my modern sensibilities to, an author who wrote most of this work, a century ago or very close to a century ago.
Right.
You had an interesting little tidbit that I had not discovered, something about Bor. You'd mentioned something that you read in History of Middle-earth. Share that with us.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. As we said, we just, seen, actually, no, we haven't quite gotten there yet, that Bor ends up allying himself to Maedhros and Maglor, and he stays faithful to them. So he's on the side of good. Ulfang allies himself to Caranthir and ends up betraying Caranthir. What ends up happening with Bor's people is I'm looking at the Grey Annals again. I'm getting a lot of mileage out of the Grey Annals today.
That's a great little thing, though, isn't it? There's a lot of information there.
Basically, just a list of years of the First Age and like what happened to them. But there's a little footnote in the year 463, which is basically right in line with where we are here.
Right.
It says, it was afterthought that the people of Ulfang were already secretly in the service of Morgoth ere they came to Beleriand. Not so the people of Bor, who were worthy folk and tillers of the earth. Of them, it is said, came the most ancient of the men that dwelt in the north of Eriador in the Second Age and in after days. So, basically, imagine that Bor's people, after the end of the First Age, they migrate east and they settle in the north of Eriador. I'm not
how
sure
far
exactly.
North, right.
That's what I'm not sure about, because it says in the north. So I'm not sure if, now let me go back to my map here. I'm not quite sure if we're talking about sort of like the North Downs, Hills of Evendim area. Or if we're talking even further north, like Carn Dûm and Forodwaith.
Yeah.
Well, definitely not Carn Dûm.
Well, no, not Carn Dûm.
but like
or
Forodwaith.
over a little bit further west, the Ice Bay of Foreshell,
Or the Ice Bay of
the snowmen
Foreshell, right.
well, I should say Forochel.
Right, yes. I know. I always say Foreshell, but it is.
I do too.
It is Forochel. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
they could
yeah,
be up in the hills of Evendim or the North Downs or Fornost. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know, but
So it's possible. I guess the way I see it is one of two things happened to these people. Either they became the snowmen, the Lossoth of
Yeah.
Forochel, or maybe they didn't go quite that far north, and maybe they ended up mingling in with the Brelanders.
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, that could be. Something I caught just as you read that. I love that they were described as tillers of the earth, and that was like the one thing that kind of identified them as good.
Yeah, that's true.
And Tolkien really, really often ties those two together. That sort of
People
pastoral.
who are close to the earth. Yeah, yeah.
Just thought I'd point that
That's
out.
true.
Really
That's a
cool.
good point.
Well, not a lot of love between the Edain and the Easterlings, but part of that may just be because they met seldom, like the text says. The Easterlings lived for a long time in East Beleriand, but because of the war, Hador's folks were all the way over in Hithlum, and Beor's house was pretty much gone. So
Right.
and Haleth, the people of Haleth,
And the
were hiding
Haladin
in
are just
Brethil.
kind of hiding out in their forest.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know, what that says per se about the connection between the Edain and the Easterlings, but there you have it.
Yeah.
I've got a section. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll see some Easterling and House of Hador stuff later on.
Oh, we certainly will. Yes.
But it's going to be the not so good Easterlings that we're going to see that with. Yeah.
Brada, yeah. That's going to be good stuff. I've got a passage for you to read here telling us a little bit about the people of Haleth during all this time.
All right. And amid the tale of defeats of that time, the deeds of the Haladin are remembered with honor. For after the taking of Minas Tirith, the orcs came through the western pass, and maybe would have ravaged even to the mouths of Sirion. But Halmir, lord of the Haladin, sent swift word to Thingol, for he had friendship with the elves that guarded the borders of Doriath. Then Beleg Strongbow, chief of the March Wardens of Thingol, brought great strength of the Sindar armed with axes into Brethil. And issuing from the deeps of the forest, Halmir and Beleg took an orc legion at unawares and destroyed it. Thereafter the black tide out of the north was stemmed in that region, and the orcs dared not cross the Taglin for many years after. The people of Haleth dwelt yet in watchful peace in the forest of Brethil, and behind their guard the kingdom of Nargothrond had respite, and mustered its strength.
I love that. First of all, Beleg Strongbow shows up. We love Beleg.
Beleg. Who
Everybody
doesn't love
loves
Beleg
Beleg.
Cuthalion? Yep.
Beleg Cuthalion. I love
Don't get to see much of him here. We're going to really get to know him in
will.
chapter 21. But
And then, I love the phrase, the black tide out of the north.
isn't that cool? Yeah.
That's awesome. But you had something to say about their choice of weapons.
Axes. Sindar with axes. How cool is that?
You're not kidding.
You never see elves
Dwarvish
with
weapons,
axes.
but no,
Yeah.
these are elves with. These aren't like little, fencing swords. These aren't foils or épées. These
Right.
are axes.
They're not rapiers. They're not slender bows. Yeah, these are
That's
axes.
exactly what I was going to say. The elves of Osirian need to take note. Maybe, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
the Teleri
get-
need to take note. Maybe
get some
slender
axes,
bows aren't
guys.
so good.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, it's so cool, man. When you think of who wields an axe, you see in this world you think of dwarves.
yes.
In the real world you might think of Vikings or Franks or some big burly fighting tribe.
Yeah,
Beleg. I mean, doesn't his name mean mighty or strong
I believe so. Well, Strongbow. Yeah.
or great or great? Yeah, Cuthalion is strongbow. That's
Cuthalion
right.
is, yeah.
Beleg, I think, is just great.
Yeah.
Great Strongbow is his name.
That's awesome. What a cool name.
It's just
Who doesn't love
Yeah.
Beleg?
He doesn't-
He's such a great character.
he is.
Man,
He's fantastic.
awesome. I love this
We'll
little
get to see
story.
a lot more of him soon.
We will, and I'm I love that Halmir pals up with Beleg, and they wipe out an entire legion of orcs.
Yeah.
That is no small task.
No.
So it's no wonder that that the deeds of the Haladin are remembered with honor.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
But the orcs didn't come back.
Yeah, no slender bows here. I just absolutely love that part. And that Finrod gets a little respite here, as
Yeah.
a result of their work.
Yep.
which I'm not sure Thingol would be so thrilled with. That he, well, no, he's okay with Finrod.
He's all right with Finrod. That's
it's
true.
the Sons
yeah.
of Fëanor. He absolutely would not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because we have to keep moving, we're going to keep moving.
Let's do it.
So we get a little bit of Hurin and Huor. Before we read this, we want to talk a little bit about this next paragraph here. So they are, let's see, how do we get the relation here? They are sons, okay. They're sons of Galdor.
Right.
But they're okay, and Galdor, so they're a mix of that race plus the Haladin.
Plus the Haladin, because their mother was Hareth
right.
of the Haladin.
Yeah, that's the key. That's the thing to remember.
Yeah.
And they both went to this battle with the orcs, even though Huor was only 13.
13 years old.
13!
I know. That's a tough kid, man. Yeah.
So they get lost after being cut off. Mm-hmm. Ulmo protects them. A mist hides them. They escape over the Brithiac. And then Thorondor sees them and takes them, of all places, to Gondolin. Now, like you said, it's almost like Ulmo has a plan.
It's almost like Ulmo has a plan here. I don't know. I'm just saying.
It's possible. It just seems a little coincidental.
He keeps Hurin safe. He tells Turgon, hey, these guys are coming. Treat them well.
Yeah.
Think he's got something in mind here. I don't know.
I think so. Well, let's see how Turgon responds. There, Turgon the king received them well when he learned of their kin, for messages and dreams had come to him up Sirion from the sea, from Ulmo, Lord of Waters, warning him of woe to come, and counseling him to deal kindly with the sons of the house of Hador, from whom help should come to him at need. Hurin and Huor dwelt as guests in the king's house for well nigh a year, and it is said that in this time Hurin learned much lore of the elves, and understood also something of the counsels and purposes of the king. For Turgon took great liking for the sons of Galdor, and spoke much with them, and he wished indeed to keep them in Gondolin out of love, and not only for his law that no stranger, be he elf or man, who found the way to the secret kingdom and looked upon the city should ever depart again, until the king should open the leaguer, and the hidden people should come forth. But Hurin and Huor desired to return to their own people, and share in the wars and griefs that now beset them. And Hurin said to Turgon, Lord, we are but mortal men, and unlike the Eldar. They may endure for long years, awaiting battle with their enemies in some far distant day. But for us the time is short, and our hope and strength soon wither. Moreover, we did not find the road to Gondolin, and indeed we do not know surely where the city stands, for we were brought in fear and wonder by the high ways of the air, and in mercy our eyes were veiled. Then Turgon granted his prayer, and he said, By the way that you came, you have leave to depart, if Thorondor is willing. I grieve at this parting, yet in a little while, as the Eldar account it, we may meet again. Well, a little while is at least 52 years from what we've talked about.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. I love that passage.
It was this whole exchange that made me, think of that question from the mailbag. That's exactly what Hurin is basically saying here. Is look, we're mortal men. We can't sit around and wait all
40 years from now, I won't even be physically capable of lifting an axe.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I love, of course, Turgon's response is, I'll see you soon. In elf years, I'll see you soon.
In elf years. Human years are they're like dog years.
Right, exactly.
7, And it's interesting that, Thorondor has to obviously take part because you're not going to be able to, we're not going to take you to the exit. But you have to wonder whether, Turgon's law might have been a little bit broader. I mean, it sounds like for the law to apply, you have to have found the way to the kingdom and looked upon the city. And now you can't leave. Maybe it ought to have been something like, it exists.
Yeah.
He's got this policy that's kind of like that Clash song, should I stay or should I go now?
Oh, nice.
But
nicely done. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know the way here? I don't know. But yeah, the fact that they just know it exists ends up being a problem, as we'll see.
Right. Right.
But Yeah.
And we will see that pretty soon.
We will see that pretty soon. So we won't read this, but Macmillan's not a big fan of
No.
Hurin and Huor.
No, not at all. Grieve not at all. They're going.
Grieve not at all. He begrudged them the favor of the king. He had no love for any of the kindred of men.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know. He kind of gets in their faces about, his law is less stern than aforetime. It just occurs to me that, this is a guy who stood by silently.
Said nothing
when his father killed his mother.
See you, Dad.
And then got thrown off a cliff.
Right. Exactly.
And now
you're upset about it?
Face. Yeah, exactly.
And like they had anything to do with it.
Right. I know. I don't know. I just...
And what's his beef with men? What is his beef with men? He hasn't met a man yet.
That's a good point.
Right? He was in this isolated backwoods of Nan Elmoth. He knew the dwarves.
Yeah.
But...
That's true. Yeah. What does he have against men?
Yeah.
I don't know.
He must just see them as totally inferior,
Probably, yeah.
Which
I just can't quite figure out what he's annoyed at.
What's his gripe?
He's got some chip on his shoulder. I don't know why. You got accepted into the greatest city in Beleriand.
Yeah.
And you're in the favor of the king.
And you're in the favor of the king. But he is. I think he's perpetually cranky because, well, let's face it, he wants Idril and he can't have her. He's kind of walking around all the time, really just kind of.
Yeah, it's probably true. Yeah.
I think he's probably in a foul mood pretty much 24/7.
All the time, yeah.
He probably has no love for any of the kindred of anybody at this point.
Not,
really. He's just kind of a jerk now.
Yeah. He's just angry, just an angry man.
Yeah, yeah. He is, and we know that, right? We see that love turned to darkness.
Angry elf, sorry.
Angry elf. Well, angry human. Angry male.
Angry guy.
Yeah.
He's an angry guy.
He is. He's an angry guy. Yeah, he's just ticked. He's just constantly ticked. That love turned to darkness in his heart, right? That's we talked about that episode.
Yeah. And you just see him start gradually hating everything.
Yeah. He's just getting darker and darker. I think this is Tolkien showing us that he's gone from being, taking Turgon for his lord and swearing fealty to now he's kind of in that process of going from maybe a decent guy who could be salvaged to nope, pretty much not. And this is just, some evidence of that, where he gets really, cranky with these guys. But like they point out,
what else is an interesting question is how much Hurin and Huor were the tipping point for that? Like was he going that way already, or was it like Hurin and Huor like, man, this place is just going downhill. Now they're letting humans in, and
out, not just in,
and
but out.
And remember that
I just realized Gondolin. We've talked about Gondolin as a roach motel. I think it's a parking privilege or a parking structure. No in and out privileges.
No in and out privileges. Yeah, exactly. No, I'm just now remembering, of course, Macmillan has a little bit of foresight sometimes, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Yeah.
So it is possible that he sees what's going to happen.
He sees Huor and thinks,
yeah, this guy's line is,
yeah, this guy's line is a threat to me.
Is a threat to me and my personal goals. We'll just leave that there for a few chapters.
We will. For a few chapters, indeed. Well, let's see. Sorry about that. I had to stifle a yawn. So there was like a second of silence as I just
riveting conversation with me.
Totally
I know all
riveting.
the time. All the time.
Oh, come on! It's got nothing to do with that. We record this late.
I know. Oh man, yeah.
For those that don't know, and I think I don't mind telling folks this. We typically record this. We usually start around 9 p.m. my time, which is about 11 p.m. Sean's time. So like right now, it's like 11:15 at night or 1:15 in the morning for Sean.
Here in the morning
because we've got jobs, we've got wives, we've got kids. So we can't do this in the middle of the day. So I'm often yawning. I don't know. Sean and his caffeine addiction, he's able to maintain without getting tired. I don't know.
Yeah, but when you hear when you hear this, that's me bouncing off the walls.
That's not the horse in your closet that we found out last time.
No. We'll let the horse out.
They're good. Well, so
you needing glue? I've got lots of glue.
Oh wow. You just really all the.
I just angered a lot of people. I'm sure.
You really did.
I love horses. I do. I adore horses.
So Hurin, he responds to Macmillan, and we're not going to read the whole thing, but his whole point is basically, we're not. I guess I could read it. The king's grace is great indeed, but if our word's not enough, we'll swear oaths. So they promise not to tell anything, right? The first rule of Gondolin is don't talk about Gondolin. so they get that.
The second rule of Gondolin is do not talk about Gondolin.
But when they get back, the eagles take them back, and there are people like, you've been gone a year, and here you are looking like you've been living in living the high life. You don't look like you've been living in the forest for a year. And they have to just basically say, just be happy we're here. We can't tell you a thing.
Just don't ask any questions.
We can't. Don't ask. We won't. Don't ask. Don't tell. This is the don't ask, don't tell policy of Gondolin. So, interesting stuff.
You see how that works out though, because their strange fortune does reach the ears of the servants of Morgoth.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. That's about why Turgon might have been better off to just say, the fact that we exist is enough to say you can't leave. But of course, I'm glad he did, because otherwise we wouldn't have Turin and Tuor. if Turin and Huor had gotten stuck there. But we'll get to them.
We'll get to that soon.
Later on. So again, we are probably getting pretty close to having a wrap up. So let's move on. I'm going to have you read a paragraph about Turgon sending some ships.
Okay. Now when Turgon learned of the breaking of the Leaguer of Angband, he would not suffer any of his own people to issue forth to war, for he deemed that Gondolin was strong, and the time not yet ripe for its revealing. But he believed also that the ending of the siege was the beginning of the downfall of the Noldor, unless aid should come. And he sent companies of the Gondolindrim in secret to the mouths of Sirion in the Isle of Balar. There they built ships, and set sail into the uttermost west upon Turgon's errand, seeking for Valinor, to ask for pardon and aid of the Valar. And they besought the birds of the sea to guide them. But the seas were wild and wide, and shadow and enchantment lay upon them, and Valinor was hidden. Therefore none of the messengers of Turgon came into the west, and many were lost, and few returned. But the doom of Gondolin drew nearer.
At least he tried. I mean, really, truly, that's my first thought. He knew that we needed to seek the pardon and aid of the Valar. Yeah. He knows full well.
He remembered Ulmo's warning that hope was going to come from the west.
Hope comes from the west.
Yeah,
and that's good.
And he sought pardon too, not just asking for
not just help, but pardon.
Asking for pardon.
I kind of contrast that with what we read at the beginning of the chapter when, Fingolfin went to, to seek a fight. And that was wise according to his counsel, but he had forgotten basically that this is all for naught if we don't, get the help of the Valar.
That's a good point. So, probably seemed like a good idea at the time. But,
but we have to remember, Valar, the Valar will fence Valinor against you.
Right.
This is the door's closed.
Yeah.
At least for now.
Exactly. I mean, it's hidden, and there's all this shadow and enchantment. You can't find the way. It's like the Bermuda Triangle or something when you're trying to get there.
Seriously,
just getting lost.
The Enchanted Isles. I don't want to go too far into this because we'll cover him again in the future, but I want to point out that there's one, they said none of the messengers came into the west. Many were lost, few returned. There's one that returned that we will be meeting by the name of Voronwë.
Voronwë, yes.
And I'm just going to give you a little quote from Unfinished Tales. Again, I recommend highly that if you haven't picked that book up, please do, because we're going to be touching on Tuor real soon. Voronwë is the last mariner from the last ship that sought the west from the havens of Círdan. So we'll come back to that, but definitely remember that.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So this next section, we won't be reading anything about Morgoth's renewed assault, but we just want to touch on it. There's this unquiet regarding Finrod and Turgon and their locations. He really fears what they might do. So he sends his spies out, but he recalls the armies, interestingly. And then we do see, though, another big Yeah, go ahead.
And we see just differing levels of knowledge. He knows about Nargothrond. He's heard of its name. He just doesn't know where it is, and he doesn't know how strong it is.
But Gondolin, he knows nothing.
Gondolin, he doesn't know anything about. He knows Turgon's out there somewhere.
That's all
but
he knows.
He doesn't know. That's all he knows.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
He's definitely nervous and right to fear them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he's suffered a big loss too. So, he pulled back his armies so that they could recover a little bit. But 7 years later, he renews his assault and he attacks Hithlum. Now, this is interesting. Galdor the Tall, this would be the son of...
This is the son of Hodor.
Hodor, yeah, right.
And,
who had
and the
died
brother
in the
of
exact
Gundor.
same place.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
His father and his brother were slain...
Pretty much
I'm pretty
right
sure
there.
by arrows. I know his brother was slain by an arrow. Probably his dad, too.
Yeah. And he gets killed by an arrow.
Yeah.
I might recommend some better armor.
And he's Galdor the Tall, so he's an easy target to hit with an arrow.
You might want to duck.
Yeah. You don't think he came to that hill and just kind of looked around and just thought, wait, this looks like the place Dad died. And then the arrow hits him.
Sorry. I mean, really, I couldn't resist it.
Yeah.
So, Galdor, though, his son is Hurin. So,
yeah.
Yeah, Hurin, his son, was then newly come to manhood.
Hurin and Huor, yeah.
Yeah, Hurin and Huor. Yeah, right, that's right. So Hurin was his son. So this guy is Turin's grandfather, for those of you who know Turin. But anyway, so Hurin, still just a young man, but I love this line. He drove the orcs with heavy slaughter from Ered Wethrin and pursued them far across the sands of Anfauglith. Yeah, that's Hurin.
That's right. He's like the human Beleg, just like this big, burly, with the
axe.
He's not big. He's short. Actually.
No, he's short,
very short,
lithe, and we'll get to a little bit more of that description of him.
Yeah.
In fact, let's just move on to that because I think. Oh wait, no, we don't want to move on to that yet. We've got one more thing to say here. Is that Fingon gets really in a tight spot. The battle is now on the plains of Hithlum itself, so he's not fighting on Anfauglith, trying to keep them out of the Ered Wethrin. They're now up and around, coming around from the north, down the plains of Hithlum. So Fingon's about to get wiped out, and then somebody sails to the rescue. Círdan shows up.
Círdan
comes up the Firth of Drengist, and saves them by attacking from the west. So he flanks them, and the orcs get driven out. So awesome. Thank you, Círdan. Very, very much appreciated. I owe you one.
I love that hero moment because it reminds me so much of Aragorn in Return of the King.
Sailing the ships up
the ships up the Anduin, to help Minas Tirith. I love that.
Love that. Of course, what makes that better is that it's a total surprise. They've got the black sails.
True.
Everybody thinks it's the bad guys.
Everybody thinks it's the Corsairs. And then
Pelargir has been taken, and
right.
And then all of a sudden they reveal the tree with the 7 stars.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. That is a brilliant drama moment.
Love that. That's the eucatastrophe right there.
Yep. But this is cool. You don't get to see Círdan much in battle, and I like the fact that
I know you'd kind of think of him as just this guy, who watches over the ships, and he's kind of he's the tour guide that takes you to your final destination. He's kind of like the ferryman in the River Styx in some ways. But
interesting thought. Yeah.
Yeah, but he shows up here to save Fingon's butt, and he does it, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
And their horsed archers pursued them all the way into the Ered Wethrin, which is really cool. I love that they have mounted archers. But let's look at this last little bit because this tidbit really leads us into the next chapter. Well worth reading these last 2 paragraphs, and then we'll wrap up. Thereafter, Hurin, son of Galdor, ruled the house of Hador in Dor-Loman and served Fingon. Hurin was of less stature than his fathers. Keep in mind, he's part of genetically. He's part
of the Haladin.
The Haladin. That's what's important to remember there. So he's of less stature than his fathers or his son after him. But he was tireless and enduring in body, lithe and swift after the manner of his mother's kin, Hareth of the Haladin. See, if I just read ahead, I wouldn't have had to interrupt myself.
That's how I could remember. I was looking at it right there. I was like, oh, it's the Haladin. It's right there.
It's late. His wife was Morwen Elethwen, daughter of Baragund of the house of Beor. she who fled from Dorthonion with Rhiann, daughter of Beleriand, and Imeldir, the mother of Beren. Wow, those are three very important women.
Very.
In that time also, the outlaws of Dorthonion were destroyed, as is told hereafter, and Beren, son of Barahir alone, escaping, came hardly into Doriath. So, Halladin, like the Halladin, he's shorter, but he's completely tireless and enduring. He's like this cross-country runner.
Yeah, he reminds me of what we used to call a scrapper growing up. Just like like a little guy. You don't think he's going to be much in a fight. But don't tangle with him. Don't tangle with him because he will destroy you.
And you will wear out long before he will.
True, that's true.
He'll just keep on. He'll keep moving. You're going to swing these big punches, and he's just going to dodge them and wait until you can't stand up anymore, and then he's going to pound you. Yeah, that's definitely who he is. And boy, does he have endurance. I can't wait till we get to that moment. You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
The day will come. The day will come. Yes. Oh, I love that. So he's married to Morwen.
Couple chapters away.
I know. Not far. I can't believe how far we've gotten into this book.
I know.
So he's married to Morwen, who belongs to Beor's house. So he's the son of Galdor. So he's of kind of Malak's house. He ends up marrying somebody from Beor's house. But he's also of the house of the Halladin. Yeah.
Right.
Which so really is pretty cool. Once again, we get that combination and what it creates. Though in the case of Turin, it might have been better had it not. We'll see.
Well,
I know.
But we'll see the same thing, though, with Rhiann, who's also of Beor's house.
That's true. And Tuor, of course, is...
And she will marry Huor. Yeah. Huor's got the same lineage that Hurin has. So I think in Turin and Tuor, you really see... It's almost like you see two different versions of what that combined lineage can produce.
You're absolutely right.
And more on that in a few chapters, I guess.
Boy, much more on that, because the combination, the comparison between those two is going to be fun.
Yeah.
So the outlaws of Dorthonion are all killed, including Gorlin the Unhappy, except for Beren, who makes it to Doriath. And then, what happened next? Well,
we don't have a to be continued caption to put up on your phone or your podcast device, but stay tuned because we'll find out soon.
Indeed, we will. Well, that wraps it up for a very long episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. We thank you very much for joining us.
And join us again when we finally get to the most well-known and certainly one of the most beloved stories in the Legendarium. Tolkien himself called it the chief of the stories of the Silmarillion. It's chapter 19 of Beren and Luthien.
Now that'll be after our... I was going to say, it's just coming up. Can't believe how quickly that's coming.
I know, it's amazing.
That's another long chapter, though, with a lot going on, and we have decided to split that up, not into 2, but 3 episodes.
Trying to spare you another really long episode like this one.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, we can't keep doing this.
No. 3 episodes for a single chapter, but it's going to be worth it. Not only is it a very long chapter, but a lot happens in it, and we really want to discuss every detail. So,
really do.
For our first episode of Beren and Luthien, we're going to cover through the section break that is on page 170 of the edition we're using. It's the passage that ends with the phrase, "They smiled and went from the halls."
Yep, that's where you want to read to, folks, especially if you've never read before. If you need cheap paperbacks to mark up, you're still looking for an inexpensive copy, use the links on our library page at theprancingponypodcast.com. We really appreciate it if you do that. We also have links to audiobooks, music CDs, and other cool things for your Tolkien collection.
As well as just a lot of fun stuff like outtakes.
Our outtakes and our Prancing Pony ponderings, the essays that we've been writing.
Yeah.
Some great stuff. So please check out our site.
Yes, please do. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe on iTunes or Google Play Music. We need your iTunes reviews, so please leave one if you haven't. You know what? Even if you don't listen to us on iTunes, you can leave a review for us on iTunes.
Yes, you can.
We're also on Stitcher and TuneIn. And thanks to those of you who are connecting with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at the Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
And it's a great place to share our podcast as well. Please retweet us, share us, tell your friends. And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or your favorite dance moves for a gimpy Dark Lord to the Prancing Pony Podcast at gmail.com. And we'll try to get him in our next episode. 2 hours and 15 minutes, maybe? 2:10? Still far too short a time to spend amongst such admirable listeners and patient listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.